What happens when one of the most trusted names in hygiene tries to sell you dinner? In the mid-1960s, Colgate-Palmolive, a brand synonymous with mint, foam, and the bathroom sink, launched a line of dried chicken and crab meat entrees. Within months, nearly 4 out of 10 packages came back unsold. The boardroom logic made perfect sense. The consumer reaction did not. Why does a brand so familiar at the bathroom sink feel so out of place at the dinner table? To answer that, it helps to look back at how Colgate became a fixture in American life, not just as a product, but as a ritual. In 1873, Colgate's first toothpaste appeared in a glass jar, a squat utilitarian package that sat beside the soap and comb. The real breakthrough came in 1896, when Colgate introduced toothpaste in a collapsible metal tube. This small change made all the difference. Suddenly, a dab of paste could be squeezed directly onto the brush, clean and precise, every morning and night. Over the decades, the red and white tube became more than packaging. It was a signal. Mint, foam, and the promise of clinical cleanliness. The scent, the taste, even the sound of the cap twisting open, these sensory cues anchored Colgate to the daily act of brushing, reinforcing an association with health, hygiene, and scientific trust. By the 1950s, advertising campaigns like "Smile with Colgate" and the bright jingle that played on radios across the country only deepened the connection. For millions, Colgate was not just a product but a habit, a reassuring part of waking up and winding down. These deeply rooted associations, built over generations, set the boundaries for what consumers expected from the brand. When Colgate eventually tried to stretch beyond the bathroom, it was not just launching a new product. It was asking people to rewrite a ritual, a much harder task than moving toothpaste from a jar to a tube. Inside Colgate's executive suite, the mood was restless. By the early 1960s, the company's growth in toothpaste and personal care had slowed, and the board was under pressure to find new engines of expansion. George Henry Lesh, who took the helm as president in 1961, was known for his appetite for bold moves. He saw the rise of convenience foods not as a passing fad, but as a seismic shift in how Americans lived and ate. The numbers were impossible to ignore. According to a 1964 Time magazine profile, the U.S. convenience food market had ballooned to $4.2 billion, with analysts projecting a compound annual growth rate of around 12%. For a consumer goods giant like Colgate-Palmolive, the math seemed compelling. Even a sliver of that market could mean millions in new revenue. Lesh's directive was clear. Don't just watch the trend, join it. Board minutes from October 1962 show formal approval for a diversification plan targeting the ready meal segment. The company began testing freeze-dry technology, hoping to leapfrog traditional canned goods and enter the race with a product that could promise both long shelf life and easy preparation. In the boardroom, this was spreadsheet logic at its purest. Leverage Colgate-Palmolive's household name, tap into a booming sector, and use existing relationships with drugstores to speed distribution. The cross-functional task force, led by marketing vice president Robert Miller, projected $5 million in first-year revenue from the new food line. The calculations were precise, the market signals strong, and the pressure to deliver was swift. What no one in that room could quantify was how deeply the Colgate name was welded to the idea of cleanliness, and how hard it would be to transfer that trust from the bathroom sink to the family dinner table. What does it look like when a bathroom brand tries to serve dinner? For shoppers in 1963, the answer sat quietly on a drugstore rack, a slim rectangular pouch labeled Colgate Kitchen Chicken a la carte, or Crab Meat Supreme. The packaging echoed the familiar Colgate toothpaste tube, stark white background, bold red lettering, and a ribbon motif nearly identical to the one found in the oral care aisle. Yet here, instead of mint and fluoride, the promise was a quick, protein-rich meal. At a glance, the difference was only in the words. Everything else, the color scheme, the typeface, even the sense of clinical neatness, felt lifted straight from the medicine cabinet. The product lineup was narrow by design. Chicken a la carte and Crab Meat Supreme were the only two entrees approved for launch, each sold in an 8-ounce pouch with a 12-month shelf life. The instructions were simple. Add water, heat, and serve. Priced at 79 cents, these meals aimed to compete with the likes of Swanson and Carnation. But Colgate's distribution plan broke with grocery tradition. Instead of the supermarket freezer, Colgate Kitchen appeared in the same drugstores where shoppers picked up toothpaste, aspirin, and shampoo. The meals sat near the checkout, sometimes only an aisle away from the familiar red and white tube. For the shopper, the effect was jarring. The packaging cues that once signaled cleanliness and trust now hovered awkwardly over an image of reconstituted chicken or crab. Drugstore placement only amplified the confusion, blurring the line between food and non-food. In the world of Colgate Kitchen, the dinner table and the bathroom sink had never been closer or more at odds. This was the moment of contact where spreadsheet logic met the reality of consumer instinct and where the sensory boundaries of a brand were put to the test. What happens when a company famous for toothpaste tries to sell dinner? The answer lies in a handful of numbers, a memo stamped April 9, 1965, and a culture that refused to wait for slow success. After the launch of Colgate Kitchen, the executive team watched early sales with mounting concern. By mid-1964, internal reports showed just $1.1 million in revenue, far below the $5 million target set in the boardroom. But the real alarm came from a single line in the January performance review. 38% of all meals shipped were returned by retailers, most citing complaints about off-flavor or consumer confusion at the shelf. The board did not hesitate. On April 9, 1965, a withdrawal memo circulated through headquarters. The language was blunt, listing insufficient profit margins, persistent quality issues, and a brand image risk. The phrase "quickly withdrawn," later echoed in both Time and Television Age, became the official verdict. For employees, the speed of the reversal was no surprise. John Davies, a senior product engineer at the time, later recalled that they were in a culture that demanded rapid results. And if a product did not meet the 12-month profitability target, the board pulled the plug without second-guessing. The numbers left little room for debate. Nearly 4 out of every 10 pouches came back unsold. The product had been placed in drugstores, not grocery aisles, and shoppers simply could not connect the Colgate name or its red and white ribbon to something meant for dinner. The experiment ended not with a bang, but with a quiet memo and a swift retreat from shelves. In the end, the very strength of the Colgate brand in oral care became a barrier too big to cross, and the company's appetite for diversification met the hard limits of consumer instinct. How did a toothpaste brand become the face of a frozen beef lasagna that never existed? The legend of Colgate beef. Lasagna is now internet folklore, fueled by a striking image in the Museum of Failure, a red and white box boldly stamped with the Colgate logo, promising a hearty Italian meal. But the box is a modern creation, not a relic from the 1960s. When journalists from Prospect traced the image, they found no trademark filings, no production records, and no mention of lasagna in Colgate's own archives. The Museum of Failure admits their lasagna box is an artistic reconstruction meant to capture the spirit of the failed Colgate Kitchen line, not its reality. Colgate itself has issued formal statements. No lasagna was ever produced or sold. The only documented products were dried chicken and crab meat entrees. The lasagna myth endures because it makes the brand's misstep vivid. But the evidence is clear. This dinner never left the drawing board. Why do some brand extensions feel natural, while others trigger instant rejection? Marketing scholars like David Aker and Kevin Lane Keller have spent decades studying this puzzle, distilling it into a triad: functional fit, image fit, and usage occasion fit. Functional fit asks whether a company's core skills actually translate to the new product. Image fit measures whether the brand's personality and values make sense in the new category. Usage occasion fit considers if the rituals of the old and new products overlap in daily life. For Colgate Kitchen, each dimension scored low. The company's expertise was in chemistry and hygiene, not food. Its red and white branding evoked clinical cleanliness, not culinary warmth. And the leap from brushing at the sink to eating dinner at the table proved too wide. When researchers applied a permission score, a metric that predicts consumer openness to a brand extension, Colgate Kitchen landed below 0.45, well under the threshold for success. Brand permission wasn't just missing, it was actively blocked. The rare remedy, some argue, would have been a co-branded launch with an established food company, borrowing credibility where Colgate's own strengths became liabilities. Today, the line between brand strength and brand overreach remains razor thin. As companies chase growth into unfamiliar territory, Colgate's frozen meals are a warning. What builds trust at the bathroom sink can dissolve it at the dinner table. In branding, not every door leads to a kitchen.